Hello everyone, this is the tutorial for how to finish and stuff your knit pumpkin. I'm doing one in bulky weight, but the pattern's written for any weight and the finishing is the same no matter what size or weight you're doing. So let's just jump right in, I guess. So I have finished the height of my pumpkin. This was supposed to be 8.5 inches. I'm making the large. And I didn't actually use a stitch marker for this. You can if you want to, but I just made sure that these tails kind of ended up at the same general area. And now I'm going to cut my last tail, which if you read in the directions, you need it to be pretty long. And overestimating is better than underestimating. So you do not want to cut yourself short. I've cut it a little short a couple times and it was kind of a big headache, but you can figure it out. It's just harder. All right, now we need to get this off of our needles. So we're going to use the end of this long tail and a yarn needle. I like these metal ones because they have a little more weight to them, but a lot of them are plastic too, and those still work great. So you're going to thread that on and then slip the stitches off one at a time. I'm going to go all the way around and I will meet you back here. All right, so the fabric is off of my needles now. I'm just going to take this yarn needle off because I need it for a different part now. But we'll just let this top part hang out for a little bit. So first we're going to cinch up the bottom. This is going to be the bottom of our pumpkin. So you should have a decent sized tail here. I maybe should have made mine a little bit longer, but this will work. Flip it over and then I'll show you where I like to pick up these stitches so that we can close up this end. So this is where it is. I just go around this way and I go every other knit stitch and I always go up like this. So I'm picking it up. I don't ever go back down. I'm just picking it up. And you don't need to do every stitch or that's going to make your pumpkin like super bunchy. But every other is going to be good for what the look we're going for. So you're just going every other stitch, picking it up from the bottom to the top, all the way around back to the beginning, and I will meet you there. All right, so now I'm back to where I started, and my string's all looped through there. Just gonna pull really nice and kind of rearrange it as I'm pulling so it all kind of like tucks in there nicely. If you're doing like the mini or the small or even the medium, it all kind of falls into place. So with the larger ones, we have more stitches. It might require a little more convincing. Now I like to go around one more time and just kind of like put my needle through, put my needle through most of the stitches that I just went through to kind of give it an extra layer of stability, if that makes sense. So you don't have to be perfect about it, but just keep like going around the spiral at least one more time to pick up like most of these stitches. And then as your pumpkin withstands the test of time, it will be less likely to start coming unraveled. All right, There, and you can see that the hole has closed up all the way too now that I've done that. Perfect. So now we're going to tie some knots. My string's over here. I just kind of find a spot over here and tuck it through and tie a knot. Pull nice and tightly. Pumpkins do take some wrist strength, surprisingly enough. If you make, especially if you're sitting down and you're stuffing like 30 of them at a time, like I do sometimes. All right, I have 3 knots here. That should be plenty. Now I just need to poke this through the bottom. Anywhere is good, really. And pull it up. Now this is going to be the inside of our pumpkin, so we don't need to trim this or anything. It just becomes part of the stuffing. Now is the fun part. Get to stuff. And there are 2 things that I like to stuff with. So I just have a shoebox going that I kind of just throw all my scraps into as I'm making random things. So scraps actually build up pretty quickly if you're regularly making projects. So you'd be surprised how much stuffing you can collect that way. Otherwise, polyfill is another great option. You can get this really at any craft store or even on Amazon. The price is going to vary. Of course, Joann's seemed to be the best place to get it, but RIP Joann's. All right, so when you're stuffing your pumpkin, you want it to be full, but you don't want it to be busting open. Like, this is probably plenty. Once you start seeing these stitches start to like spread open a little bit, that's a good clue that you're getting close to being done. And then once you start pulling this, this seems like a good level of stuffing. Maybe do a little more just around the edges here. And sometimes I like to make like a little donut shape because this is going to get pressed down in here once we start wrapping, and then the stuffing is going to get pushed out to the sides. So you can kind of encourage it to do that right away too. All right. So now, once you're happy with your stuffing, it's not too bursting at the seams, but it's enough to like make it a nice, firm pumpkin. You want to cinch it up like this, but you want to leave a space for a cinnamon stick. And how I like to measure it is just take my index finger, and if I can just get my index, like my fingernail in here, that's probably good. So we're gonna keep it this size. We're gonna keep the hole this size, and then we're gonna do the same thing that we did on the bottom, where we just go around again through some of these so that it makes it extra strong and less likely to like start pulling out randomly when you don't want it to. So I like to keep my finger in here and pull it tight. Hopefully you can see how I'm just picking up a couple of these stitches every time. Again, if you don't get it through every single one, it's okay. Oh, what do I got here? That just got tangled. So I'm kind of keeping my finger there to make sure that that hole stays open enough for a cinnamon stick or a little stick that you find out in the yard or whatever you like to use for stems. Okay, I think we're pretty much back to the beginning. All right, one more, I guess. All right, now we have this, and this is not going anywhere. Now is the super fun part. We get to make the bumps on our pumpkin. So we're gonna make 5 bumps, and we're gonna do that by wrapping this extra yarn. That's why you needed all this extra. Wrapping it and putting it through the bottom, back through the top, and pulling it tight so it makes a nice little bump. It's gonna be so fun. Ready? So I like to, well, you're gonna put your needle in the bottom, center, there we go, and kind of feel with your finger and pull it up through the top. Pull, pull, pull. This first one is probably going to be the trickiest because your string is so long because you've, there we go. Okay, so see how that's making a bump for me? I like to look at this, see how this is not on track. That is not going to be pretty. So I'm just gonna move this over so it stays like in the row, and then it just kind of hides itself in there. So pull, nice. So there's that. And I said we want to make 5. So there's 1. And the more you do it, the better you'll get on where to put these, but just kind of make sure they're equally spaced around. Gonna poke through the bottom again. Bring it up through the top. Pull, see where your string ends up and see if it needs any guidance. This one actually looks pretty good. Pull it tight. Okay, we have 2. I'm gonna let this string out of my needle a little bit more. I'm gonna go around, put it about here. Poke it through the bottom. Up through the top. Pull tightly. All right, we have a 3rd one. That looks pretty nice. Okay, now when we get to this part, I'm gonna put 4 right here. I'm gonna put 5 about there. So just don't get caught up at the end being like, oh my goodness, my last 2 bumps are like so tiny because I made my other ones too big. And in the end, you can always probably take these out and start over with the bumps, but you'll get the hang of it. And I mean, not all pumpkins are perfect. So the pumpkin will just look more realistic. All right, so 5 bumps. And now what we want to do is secure this. So this was my last bump here. I want to go into the hole like over on this side so that it, and I want to go into the side. Can you see that? Yes. I want to go into the side of this. Like not just back down into the stuffing hole, you need to go into the side of the cinched fabric. Push it back down through the bottom. Pull tight. Okay, now that's trapped. It can't go anywhere. It's not going to come unraveled. This is how it is. It's stuck there. All right, now we're back in the bottom. We're going to tie 2 or 3 knots again, just like we did when we were cinching the bottom. And you really can just tie them anywhere because they're all just going to be hidden up in here and no one's going to notice or care that there are knots down there. Okay, that was 2 knots, and then 3 knots. Ooh. Okay, we got it. All right, nice and tight. So our knots. Now the last thing we want to do is hide this end, because if you cut it here, it's probably going to come undone. And we can't just leave like an end like floating here. So I just push it back through to the top so that the end gets stuck inside the pumpkin with the stuffing, and then we're going to cut this really close. And this is the extra I had left. So like I said, it was too much, but better to have too much than too little. That can just go right into my scrap bin. And then your pumpkin is done. So this is the top with the hole for the cinnamon stick. In the pattern, I'm going to be linking the cinnamon sticks that I get in bulk on Amazon, like in a big bag. That is much more cost effective than trying to like buy a little box of them at the grocery store or something, and you only get like 7. All right, there we have it. I might switch this out for like a chunkier cinnamon stick later, but you get the idea. So that is how you finish and cinch up your knit pumpkin. I hope you enjoyed it.